All right, so today we're doing a deep dive into this company, Haptic R&D Consulting.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them.
They presented this really cool podcast series
Mm-hmm.
at DIC 2024.
DIC, that was a great event.
Yeah, it was all virtual.
Yeah.
And this podcast series is called Digital Horizons.
Okay.
It was all about the future of the digital world,
Mm-hmm.
digital economies,
Fashion.
Internet of Things, cybersecurity, all that good stuff.
Sounds right up our alley.
Exactly. But what I thought was really cool about this series was they didn't just talk about the theory.
Yeah.
They actually gave practical advice and case studies. So it's like a master class in navigating the digital world.
That's great because so much of this stuff is theoretical and it's good to actually hear how it's being used.
Right. And they really dug deep into how to actually leverage the digital economy, how to secure the Internet of Things, and even just how to make the most of these virtual events.
Oh, that's interesting.
So in their first episode, they kind of set the stage, introduce DIC, and then share Haptic's overall vision for the future. And what I thought was really interesting here is that their CEO actually lays out their goals for digital transformation.
Hmm. That is interesting. Why would they do that?
Well, I think they're trying to show how their company's goals align with the bigger picture, like a more connected, innovative world.
Oh, okay. So it's not just about them. It's about how they fit into this larger ecosystem.
Exactly. And they're also walking the walk, so to speak, because they're using virtual collaboration to achieve their goals, which is something we're all dealing with these days.
Yeah, for sure. Makes sense.
So then they jump right into the good stuff with episode 2, Unlocking the Potential of the Digital Economy.
All right, let's hear about it.
So imagine a world where businesses are powered by data automation, global connections.
Sounds pretty futuristic.
Yeah, that's the digital economy in a nutshell. And Haptic Strategist dives into how to navigate this new landscape.
Okay.
And one of the things that I thought was super useful was their advice on identifying your existing strengths.
Like, what do you mean?
So instead of trying to be everything to everyone in this digital world,
Right.
they argue that you should double down on what you're already good at.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's focus on your core competencies and then figure out how to apply those to the digital world.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Because it's easy to get caught up in chasing every trend.
Yeah, that's true. You can spread yourself too thin.
Right. So then they talk about using data analytics to really understand your customers.
Okay.
And it's not just about collecting data. It's about using it to provide a truly personalized experience.
Which can be hard to do.
Yeah, some companies just bombard you with irrelevant stuff and it totally backfires.
Yeah. It's all about targeting the right audience with the right message at the right time.
Exactly. And I like how Haptic is giving these real-world tactics that you can actually use, not just talking about abstract concepts.
Yeah, that's what makes it so valuable.
All right, so then in episode 3, things get really interesting because they shift gears to the Internet of Things.
IoT, everyone's talking about it.
It's like something out of science fiction,
Yeah.
Smart homes, self-driving cars, cities that practically run themselves.
Right, it's mind-blowing.
But Haptic's IoT architect brings us back down to earth a bit, especially when talking about security challenges.
Yeah, the more connected we are, the more vulnerable we become, right?
Exactly. And they talk about how securing those connections is critical in this interconnected world.
Makes sense.
And what stood out to me was their discussion of how to balance innovation with security.
Okay.
So it's not about halting progress. It's about baking security into the design from the very beginning.
Yeah, like building a house, you don't wait till it's finished to add the locks on the doors, right?
Exactly.
That's a good analogy.
And then episode 4, Cybersecurity. In a digital world, they really drive home the importance of cybersecurity.
Well, I mean, it's something that we all need to be thinking about.
Right. Our lives are basically digital. Now we're online banking, shopping, working,
Yeah.
and they're not sugarcoating it. They have this cybersecurity expert
Yeah.
who basically says there's a constant battle against cyber threats going on behind the scenes.
It can be kind of scary when you think about it.
But instead of just scaring us, they give us a framework for thinking about cybersecurity.
Okay, what's that?
So they talk about how building a culture of security within organizations is crucial.
A culture of security.
Yeah, so it's not just about having the latest tech. It's about educating employees, creating protocols, being proactive, not reactive.
Oh, okay. So it's like everyone needs to be on the lookout for suspicious emails and weird links, not just the IT guys.
Exactly. And then they also highlight the role of AI in staying ahead of those bad guys. So they talk about these AI systems that can detect and respond to threats in real time.
Oh, wow. So AI can actually help us in this fight.
Exactly. It's not all doom and gloom.
That's good to hear.
But even with AI, it's still about being aware and taking those basic steps to protect ourselves.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can't just rely on technology to do all the work for you.
Right, you have to be smart about it.
Absolutely. So it's funny, in episode 5, they actually talk about virtual events,
Oh, yeah.
which is kind of meta considering that they're presenting all of this at a virtual event.
Right? It's like they're practicing what they
It,
preach.
exactly. And their specialist gives some really solid tips for making the most of these online gatherings.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like how to network effectively in a virtual setting.
Yeah. I've always found networking online to be kind of awkward.
Yeah, me too. It can be tough. But they had some good advice about leveraging the digital format for better networking.
Like what?
Well, for example, they talked about how you can use virtual breakout rooms and targeted introductions to actually connect with people in a more meaningful way than you might at a crowded in-person event.
Oh, that's interesting. I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, and you can also use those chat features and direct messaging to follow up with people afterward, which is something you can't always do easily at a physical event.
Right. That's a good point.
So virtual events can actually level the playing field in a way.
Yeah, that's true.
So then in episode 6, they do a roundup of the key insights and trends from DIC overall.
Okay, let's hear it.
Well, one of the things that really stood out to me was this focus on data privacy and ethics.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah, it's like we're generating so much data now, it's essential to use it responsibly.
It's a tightrope walk, isn't it?
Totally balancing the potential benefits of data with the need to protect people's privacy.
And that's where haptics expertise really comes in.
Right. They're not just tech people. They're helping organizations navigate those ethical gray areas.
So what do you think is the biggest takeaway for our listener from all of this?
That's a good question. I think what struck me most was how Haptic kept emphasizing the human element in all of this digital transformation.
Yeah, like in episode 7, where they talk about their own role in shaping the digital future.
Exactly.
It wasn't just about the tech they're developing, it was about their commitment to building a more inclusive and equitable digital world.
Yeah, like they're trying to put the human back in humanity even as we become more and more digital.
Right, and I think that's what makes their perspective so valuable.
Absolutely.
Okay, but let's be real, that's a pretty lofty goal. Yeah, how are they actually putting this vision into action?
Well, they highlighted a few interesting projects. One that caught my ear was their work on developing ethical frameworks for AI.
Oh yeah, that was fascinating.
Basically creating guidelines for using AI in a way that benefits humanity rather than harming it.
Right, like addressing things like bias in algorithms and ensuring transparency in how AI systems make decisions.
Exactly. It's like they're trying to get ahead of those potential problems before they spiral out of control.
And they're not doing it in a vacuum. They talked about collaborating with universities, governments, other industry leaders to get this right.
Yeah, it's a complex issue. It's going to take a global effort to figure it out.
Okay, so remember back in episode 2 when they talked about the digital economy and how it's all about data automation and global connectivity?
Yeah.
Starting to see how that ties into everything else we've been talking about.
Right, it's all interconnected.
Exactly.
And that's why I think haptics perspective is so valuable. They're not looking at these things in isolation. They're seeing the big picture.
I'm also curious about what they said about the future of work in the digital economy. Do you remember that part?
Yeah, it was towards the end of episode 2, they predicted a shift towards a more freelance-based economy with people working on projects rather than holding traditional jobs.
They called it the gig economy, right?
Exactly. And they argued that this shift will require people to be more adaptable and to constantly be developing new skills.
So it's not just about learning one trade and sticking with it for life anymore.
Right. You have to be a lifelong learner, constantly upskilling and reinventing yourself.
That's a bit daunting, honestly.
Yeah.
But also kind of exciting in a way. Like the possibilities are endless if you're willing to embrace change.
Exactly. It's all about having a growth mindset, and that's something that Haptic emphasized repeatedly throughout their podcast series.
They also touched on the potential downsides of this shift, like the lack of traditional job security and benefits.
Yeah, that's a valid concern, but they also pointed out that the gig economy can create new opportunities for people who might not thrive in traditional work environments.
Like people who want more flexibility or who have skills that don't fit neatly into existing job descriptions.
Exactly. And then there's the whole issue of automation and AI, which is something that came up in pretty much every episode.
Yeah, the robots are coming for our jobs.
Right.
At least that's what everyone seems to be worried about.
But Haptic had a more nuanced take on it. They argued that instead of fearing automation, we should focus on how to work alongside AI and machines.
They talked about this concept of augmented intelligence, where AI assists humans rather than replacing them entirely.
Exactly. It's about leveraging the strength of both humans and machines to achieve more than either could do alone.
So instead of competing with robots, we'll be collaborating with them.
That's the idea, and they gave some really interesting examples of how this is already happening in fields like healthcare, manufacturing, and even creative industries.
I remember that example they gave about AI helping doctors diagnose diseases more accurately.
Yeah, and they talked about how AI can also be used to personalize education, create more efficient supply chains, and even compose music.
It's mind-blowing when you think about the potential.
It really is, but of course it all comes back to ethics and responsibility.
Right. We need to make sure that AI is used to benefit humanity,
Yeah.
not exploit it.
Exactly. And that's why I think haptics work is so important. They're not just developing cool tech. They're thinking deeply about the implications of what they're creating.
It's like they're trying to guide us toward a future where technology empowers us rather than enslaves us.
That's a great way to put it. They're not just building the future, they're helping us navigate it.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. Any other big takeaways that stood out to you?
You know what really stuck with me was their emphasis on lifelong learning.
Yeah, that was a recurring theme, wasn't it?
Like they were basically saying that the only constant in the digital world is change.
So, if you want to stay relevant, you have to keep learning and adapting.
Exactly. And they gave some really practical advice on how to do that. Remember when they talked about those micro-credentials?
Yeah, I'd never heard of those before. They're like mini certifications you can get to demonstrate proficiency in a specific skill or area.
Oh, okay.
So instead of spending years getting a degree that might be obsolete by the time you graduate, you can just pick up the skills you need when you need them.
Right. And they argued that these micro-credentials are going to become increasingly important in the gig economy where employers are looking for very specific skill sets.
Exactly. And they also talked about the importance of building a strong personal brand online.
Like creating a portfolio of your work and showcasing your skills on platforms like LinkedIn.
Right. They were basically saying that in the digital age, you are your own best advocate.
So you have to put yourself out there and make sure people know what you're capable of.
Exactly. And they gave some great tips on how to do that effectively without coming across as too self-promotional.
Yeah, I like that they weren't just focusing on the tech side of things. They were also addressing the human skills that are going to be essential in the digital economy.
Totally, like communication, collaboration, problem solving, critical thinking. Those are all things that AI can't replicate, at least not yet.
So it's not enough to just be tech savvy. You also
Yeah.
have to be people savvy.
Exactly. And that's something that Haptic emphasized throughout their podcast series.
Okay, so we've talked about data AI,
Yeah.
the future of work, lifelong learning. What else did I miss? Anything important?
Let's see. Well, one thing that really stood out to me was their discussion of decentralized technologies.
Oh, yeah, that was
I
fascinating.
remember them talking about blockchain and cryptocurrencies and how they're challenging traditional models of power.
Right, it's like a democratization of technology.
Exactly. And they gave some really compelling examples of how this is already happening. Like, remember that project they mentioned about creating a decentralized platform for artists to sell their work directly to fans, cutting out the middleman?
Yeah, that was cool.
And they talked about how blockchain can also be used to create more transparent and secure voting systems, track supply chains, and even verify the authenticity of goods.
It's like blockchain is the ultimate trust machine.
Exactly. It removes the need for a central authority to verify transactions or information.
And that has huge implications for everything, from finance to healthcare to government.
Totally.
It's pretty radical when you think about it.
It is. And of course, it's still early days for these technologies. So there are a lot of challenges to overcome.
Like scalability, regulation, and public understanding.
Yay. But Haptic was optimistic about the potential, and they predicted that decentralized technologies will play a major role in shaping the future.
I'm starting to see a pattern here. They seem to be really good at identifying emerging trends and technologies that are going to have a big impact.
Yeah, they're definitely ahead of the curve.
So what does all of this mean for our listener? Right, it's a lot to take in.
I think the key takeaway is that the digital world is changing rapidly, and it's going to affect every aspect of our lives.
So we can't just sit back and let it happen to us.
Right. We need to be proactive and start thinking about how we can navigate these changes and shape the future we want.
Okay, so how do we do that?
Well, Haptic gave us some really good starting points,
Like what?
like embracing lifelong learning, developing a growth mindset, staying informed about emerging technologies, and thinking critically about the ethical implications of technology.
It's like they've given us a roadmap for navigating the digital landscape.
Exactly. And they've shown us that the future is not something that just happens to us. It's something we create.
That's a powerful message. So we've really dug deep into Haptic's presentation at DEIC and all their insights about the digital world.
Yeah, we've covered a lot of ground.
I mean, everything from the digital economy and the Internet of Things to cybersecurity and, what the future of work might look like.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing when you think about all the changes that are happening.
It is, and I think it's important to kind of step back now and consider what it all means, for
Mm.
the average person listening to this.
Right, like how do we make sense of all this information and what can we actually do about it?
Exactly. And one of the big takeaways for me from this whole series was this idea of a digital mindset.
Oh, yeah, I remember them talking about that.
It's not just about, understanding technology. It's about embracing a whole new way of thinking.
Right, it's like a new operating system for your brain.
Yeah. And they talked about the importance of being adaptable, agile,
Yeah.
you know, constantly learning new things.
And they said that this digital mindset is going to be essential for success in pretty much any field.
Yeah, it doesn't matter if you're a doctor, a teacher, an artist, whatever you do, you need to be digitally fluent.
It's true, the digital world is no longer this separate thing. It's woven into everything we do.
Right. And I think that leads to another big point they made, which is the importance of human agency in all of this.
Yeah, we're not just passive bystanders in this digital transformation.
Right. It'd be easy to feel like we're at the mercy of algorithms and robots.
We're not.
Exactly. We have choices to
Exactly.
make. We have a responsibility to shape the future.
And I love how they framed it as a co-creation between humans and technology.
Yeah, it's not us versus them. It's about finding ways to work together.
Exactly, and that requires us to be active participants, not just sit back and watch it all happen.
So it's not just about, learning to code or being a tech wizard. It's about developing those human skills that are going to be even more important in the future.
Right, like critical thinking, ethical awareness,
Yeah.
being able to envision the kind of future we want.
Exactly. And that brings us to the ultimate question. What kind of digital future do we want to create?
Ah, the big question.
And I think Haptic did a great job of laying out both the opportunities and the risks.
Yeah, they talked about how technology could help us solve some of the world's biggest problems, but also how it could create new ones.
Right? It's a double-edged sword.
It is, and that's why it's so important to have these conversations, to think critically about the implications of technology and make conscious choices about the path we want to take.
So I guess the big takeaway here is that the future isn't predetermined.
Right, we're not just along for the ride.
We have the power to shape it.
Yeah, and that's both exciting and a little bit daunting.
It is, but
Yeah.
I think Haptic gave us a good roadmap for navigating this digital landscape.
They did. They gave us a lot to think about.
So to wrap things up, I want to leave our listeners with a call to action.
Okay, I like it.
Don't just consume technology, create it, shape it, question it, and use it to make a positive impact on the world.
Yeah, be the change you want to see.
That's it for this deep dive into Haptic R&D consulting and their amazing insights from DIC 2024.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
We hope you learned something new and are feeling inspired to go out there and shape the digital future.
We'll see you next time.